All right, let's dive into some negotiation skills today.
Right.
We're going to be looking at Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss.
Yeah.
And to help us unpack all of this, we're actually going to be looking at this negotiating bootcamp email series that kind of goes along with the book, gives some more real-world examples, particularly focused on real estate.
Okay.
But the skills we're talking about today, they apply to pretty much any area of life.
Right. Yeah.
Anywhere where you've got to like hammer out a deal or come to an agreement with somebody on something. So yeah, we're gonna be looking at some interesting and powerful techniques.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about this is like a completely different approach to negotiation than the typical like how to win friends and influence people kind of thing.
Right.
This is like really getting deep into the psychology of the other person. And it's called Never Split the Difference. So it's really about how do you create a win-win.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's really the key.
Yeah.
In most negotiations, at least the ones that I've been in, it feels very adversarial.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that I really liked about this is like reframing it in terms of like, how do we both win here, Okay, so let's look at the first technique.
Okay.
Mirroring.
Mirroring.
I thought this one was fascinating.
Yeah.
So tell me about mirroring.
Well, mirroring is essentially you're becoming an echo.
Okay.
But you're doing it with a purpose.
Right.
So you're repeating back key phrases as questions to the other person.
Okay.
And what this does is it gets the other person talking, and it reveals their motivations.
Yeah.
And also gets them thinking deeper about their position.
It's almost like you're holding a mirror up to their words and making them confront the implications of what they're saying.
Right.
So let's look at a for instance.
Right.
If you're a real estate agent and the seller says your commission is way too high,
Right.
instead of getting defensive, how would you use mirroring in that situation?
Instead of getting defensive, you could say, my commission is too high.
Right.
And what that does is you're not agreeing or disagreeing with them.
Right.
You're just prompting them to elaborate.
Right.
So they have to now justify their reason.
Yeah.
Or let's say you have a buyer that throws out a lowball offer.
Right.
You could simply say lowball offer.
Right.
And again, they're going to have to kind of explain themselves.
Right.
And rethink maybe what they're saying.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's such a simple but powerful technique.
Mm-hmm.
The email series suggests even practicing this while watching TV.
Oh, yeah.
It's genius.
Yeah, it's a great way to sharpen your listening skills. Just choose a character and for a few minutes mirror their lines.
I love that.
And you'll see how much more you tune in to what they're saying.
Right.
And the subtleties of their communication.
Okay, let's move on to labeling emotions.
Okay.
We've all been in those negotiations where things get a little heated.
Yeah.
Especially in real estate, there's so much at stake.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially in real estate.
So how do you use labeling emotions as a way to kind of de-escalate a situation?
Well, labeling emotions is just that. You're explicitly acknowledging the other person's feelings. And what that does is it diffuses the tension and builds rapport.
Right.
So you could say something like, it sounds like you're feeling a little anxious about this big decision. Buying a home is a huge step, and it's perfectly normal to feel that way.
It's like saying, hey, I see you. I understand where you're coming from.
Right.
Yeah.
And that can go a long way to put them at ease.
Okay, so let's say you've got a seller who is being totally unrealistic about their asking price.
Right.
How could you use labeling emotions in that scenario?
You could say something like, it seems like you're really attached to this home and you want to make sure that it goes to the right buyer.
Right.
Again, you're not challenging their viewpoint, you're just acknowledging their feelings.
Right.
Which helps create an open dialogue.
I love that.
Yeah.
You know what? And this isn't just limited to real estate.
No, not at all.
This can work in personal relationships too.
Right. Absolutely.
If you're in a disagreement with your partner, instead of just getting defensive, try labeling their emotions. It sounds like you're feeling hurt and misunderstood.
Right.
You might be surprised how quickly that de-escalates the situation.
Yeah, it really works.
Okay, now this is where Chris Voss throws a curveball.
Okay.
He calls it the no advantage.
Yeah.
This kind of goes against everything we've been taught about sales and negotiation.
Right. You think you always want to get to a yes.
Right.
But sometimes a no is actually more valuable.
How is that possible?
Because when someone tells you no, it actually gives them a sense of control.
Okay.
It helps define the boundaries of the conversation.
Okay.
And it forces them to think more deeply about what they really want.
So it's about using no-oriented questions strategically, not just accepting defeat.
Exactly.
So give us an example of how this might play out in a real estate situation.
Sure. Let's say you have a seller that's hesitant to budge on their asking price.
Okay.
So instead of trying to convince them to lower it, you could ask, are you completely opposed to considering any offers below your asking price?
Okay.
And again, you're not telling them what to do.
Right.
You're simply asking a question that allows them to voice their concerns
Okay.
and maybe open up to some other possibilities.
Okay. What about from the buyer's perspective?
So let's say you have a buyer who's dragging their feet making an offer.
Okay.
You could ask them, have you given up on finding your dream home in this market?
Oh, I like that.
And that forces them to kind of confront their hesitation.
Right.
And move forward maybe with more confidence.
So the key takeaway here is that a no isn't necessarily a dead end, but
Right.
rather an opportunity to go deeper
Right.
and uncover some hidden opportunities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A no keeps the conversation going, whereas an early yes might just be superficial.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really mean anything.
This is blowing my mind. I love this stuff. Okay,
Okay.
let's move on to earning. That's right.
Okay.
This one intrigues me because it seems so subtle, but I bet it's super powerful.
Yeah, it is.
So break it down for us. What's the difference between you're right and that's right?
Well, the difference is this. When you say you're right, you're agreeing with the other person.
Okay.
But it doesn't necessarily indicate that there's a deeper level of understanding or commitment.
Okay.
Whereas when you earn it, that's right, you're getting them to actually buy into what you're saying.
Got it.
So how do you do that?
Yeah, how do you do that?
Well, it's all about summarizing the key points that you've agreed upon and then ending with, is that right?
Okay.
So for instance, if you're working with a buyer, you can say, so you're looking for a 3-bedroom home with a spacious backyard in a family-friendly neighborhood, and you're pre-approved for a mortgage up to $500,000. Is that right?
And by recapping their needs and preferences, you're not just passively agreeing, you're actively demonstrating that you've been listening and that you understand their priorities.
Exactly.
What about when you're working with a seller?
Okay, let's say you just toured a seller's home and you're discussing their goals.
Mm.
You could say, so you're hoping to sell your home quickly. You're looking for a price that reflects its market value, and you're flexible on closing dates. Is that right?
It's so brilliant by eliciting that that's right. You're creating this sense of alignment
Yeah.
and shared understanding,
Yeah.
which lays a much stronger foundation for moving forward in the negotiation.
Exactly.
And like the other techniques we've discussed, this isn't limited to real estate. This can be applied in any area of life,
Yeah.
whether it's clarifying project scopes at work, negotiating a contract with a client, or even deciding on, weekend plans with friends.
It can be used anywhere.
It's about creating that sense of ownership and commitment,
Yes.
making the other person feel like they're a part of the decision-making process.
Exactly.
Okay, so this is fascinating. Let's dive into skill number 5, anchoring, and the certainty effect. Now, you mentioned that Voss draws on behavioral economics for this one,
Yeah, he does.
which I love.
It's fascinating how our perceptions of fairness and value
Right.
are influenced by reference points.
Mm-hmm.
So anchoring is all about setting a reference point
Okay.
that shapes the other person's thinking, even if that reference point is completely arbitrary.
So it's like dropping a heavy weight on one side of the scale, and it makes everything else seem lighter in comparison.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
So how would you use anchoring in a real estate negotiation?
Well, let's say you're representing a seller and you want to set a high anchor for the asking price.
Okay.
You could say something like, we've seen homes with similar features in this neighborhood go for as high as $600,000 recently.
Now, that price might be a bit of a stretch,
Right.
but you're planting that seed in the buyer's mind,
Exactly.
making anything below that seem more reasonable.
Yeah, you're setting the bar high.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
What about from the buyer's perspective? How could a buyer use anchoring to their advantage?
Well, if you're representing a buyer, you could use anchoring to your advantage by saying something like, we've noticed that homes in this area have been sitting on the market for an average of 60 days.
So you're suggesting that there's no rush,
Right.
which gives the buyer more leverage.
Yeah.
So it's all about strategically framing the situation
Right.
to influence perceptions.
Right.
Now, this ties into the certainty effect,
It does.
right?
Yeah.
Which states that people are generally more motivated to avoid a loss than to achieve a gain.
Exactly.
So by anchoring to these potential negative outcomes, you're highlighting the value of your services
Exactly.
and your expertise.
Yeah.
So you're not advocating for manipulation,
No,
but rather for using these psychological principles to nudge the negotiation in a direction that benefits your client.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ethical persuasion,
Right.
not manipulation.
It's about understanding how people think and make decisions,
Yeah.
and then using that knowledge ethically to guide the negotiation towards a mutually beneficial outcome.
Yeah.
Okay, this is blowing my mind. I love this stuff. Okay, I'm ready for skill number 6. The power of silence and calibrated questions.
Okay.
Now, this one seems so counterintuitive because I always thought that the person who talks the most
That.
has the upper hand in a negotiation.
You would think that.
But Voss actually argues that speaking less
Yeah.
can give you more control.
Yeah, because when you're talking, you're giving away information.
Right.
When you're quiet and you're asking carefully crafted questions, you're gathering information
Right.
and guiding the conversation.
So it's about strategically using silence to create space for the other person to reveal their thoughts and motivations.
Exactly.
Now, I'm guessing calibrated questions are a little more than just your average inquiries.
They are. They're like laser-guided missiles
Okay.
designed to extract specific information
Right.
and shape the other person's thinking.
Okay, so give me an example of a calibrated question that would be effective in a real estate negotiation.
So let's say you're working with a buyer and you want to understand their motivations beyond just the basic features of a home.
Oh, okay.
So instead of asking, are you pre-approved for a mortgage, which would lead to a yes or no answer,
Right?
you could ask, how are you approaching the financing for your home purchase?
That's a great question.
It's an open-ended question,
Right.
and it encourages them to share their thought process,
Yeah.
their financial situation,
Right.
and maybe even their anxieties around getting a mortgage.
Right.
So it gives you so much more to work with than a simple yes or no.
Absolutely. Okay, what about a calibrated question for a seller? How could you use this technique to understand their motivations?
Okay, let's say you're working with a seller, and instead of asking, are you flexible on your asking price?
Right.
You could ask, what factors are most important to you in setting the price for your home?
That's a great question.
Right. And it forces them to articulate their reasoning,
Absolutely.
whether it's market value, emotional attachment,
Right.
or specific financial goal.
Yeah, and by understanding those underlying motivations, you can tailor your approach accordingly.
Right.
So brilliant. It's about listening more than you speak,
Yeah.
using targeted questions to guide the conversation, and then allowing the other person to fill in the blanks.
Exactly.
This is like a superpower for negotiators.
It really is.
Imagine how much more effective we could be in all areas of our lives if we mastered this skill.
It's true. You can use it everywhere.
Okay, so we've covered so much ground already.
We have.
From mirroring and labeling emotions to the no advantage and calibrated questions.
Yeah.
We've only scratched the surface.
We have.
But we are going to have to leave it there for today.
Okay.
But don't worry,
Yeah.
we're coming back with part 2, and we're going to be exploring even more advanced techniques from Never Split the Difference.
Yeah.
That'll help you navigate even the most challenging negotiations.
Looking forward to it.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the deep dive into Never Split the Difference. We're going to be picking up where we left off with Chris Voss's incredible negotiation strategies.
Okay. Sounds good.
So, one of the things that I really loved about the book was how we talked about tactical empathy.
Yeah.
Now, I always thought of empathy as like, being a good person,
Mhm.
but how does that become tactical?
Well, it's understanding the other person's perspective, but not just on like an intellectual level. It's about really feeling what they're feeling
Okay.
and then using that to guide your strategy.
So it's like putting yourself in their shoes, seeing the world through their eyes,
Exactly.
and then using that insight to navigate the negotiation.
Right.
So how do we put this into practice? I mean, it sounds kind of abstract.
Well, Voss outlines several techniques in his book.
Okay.
And one of the most powerful ones is labeling, and we touched on it briefly in the last part.
Right.
But it's so crucial, it deserves a deeper dive.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Okay, so labeling is about explicitly acknowledging the other person's emotions. And that includes both positive and negative emotions.
Okay.
So imagine you're working with a seller who's clearly frustrated because their home has been on the market for a while.
Right.
Instead of ignoring that frustration, you could say something like, it seems like you're feeling a bit discouraged by the lack of offers.
So you're not trying to solve the problem, you're just acknowledging their feelings,
Right.
which can actually help disarm them and create a connection.
Exactly. And you don't even have to be spot on with your label.
Oh, really?
Sometimes it's even better if you're slightly off,
Wait, why would we want to label the emotion incorrectly?
because it encourages the other person to correct you. And in doing so, they reveal even more about their true feelings.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So, like, if you say to a buyer, it sounds like you're feeling a little hesitant about making an offer, and they're like, no, it's not hesitation. It's more about the financing.
Exactly. Even
Oh,
if your initial label was off,
yeah.
you've prompted them to clarify their thinking and reveal a deeper layer of their concern.
It's a subtle way of getting them to open up and share more, which gives you more to work with in the negotiation.
Exactly. And another powerful technique for building tactical empathy is mirroring. And we also touched on that in the last part.
Right. Mirroring. I love this one.
Yeah,
It's about repeating back key phrases as questions, which encourages the other person to keep talking and reveals their underlying motivations.
right.
How does that tie into tactical empathy, though?
Because when you mirror someone's words, you're not just passively listening. You're actively demonstrating that you're trying to understand their perspective.
So it's like you're saying, I'm with you. I'm
Exactly.
really trying to hear you and see things from your point of view.
Right. And that has a really powerful impact on building rapport and trust.
So it's about creating that psychological safety, making them feel comfortable enough to open up and share their true thoughts and feelings.
Exactly. And when people feel heard and understood, their defenses start to come down. And
Right.
that's when real breakthroughs can happen in a negotiation.
I love that. So tactical empathy, it's like a secret weapon for negotiators.
It is.
It's about understanding the other person on a deeper level and using that understanding to build a connection that can lead to a mutually beneficial outcome.
Exactly. Now, along with labeling and mirroring, another technique that Voss recommends for building tactical empathy is paraphrasing.
Okay, paraphrasing. So that sounds similar to mirroring, but what's the key difference?
So mirroring is repeating back the exact words.
Okay.
Paraphrasing is summarizing the other person's statement in your own words, capturing the essence of what they're saying.
So it's like saying, let me make sure I understand you correctly. You're saying that, and then you rephrase their statement in a way that demonstrates you've understood both the content and the emotion behind it.
Exactly. And by doing so, you're showing them that you're not just passively listening, you're actively processing their message.
So it's like you're taking their words, filtering them through your own understanding, and then reflecting them back in a way that says, I get it, I'm with you.
Exactly. And this can be really useful when you're dealing with complex issues where there's a risk of miscommunication or misunderstanding.
It's like building a bridge of understanding between two different perspectives,
Right.
making sure everyone is truly on the same page before moving forward.
Now, here's a pro tip for using paraphrasing effectively. Try ending your paraphrase with a question.
Okay, I like that. So for example, if you're working with a seller who's expressing frustration about the lack of showings, you could say, so if I'm understanding you correctly, you're feeling frustrated because you haven't had many potential buyers come through the house, is that right?
Exactly. That question invites them to confirm or clarify your understanding, which further solidifies that connection and keeps the conversation flowing.
These are great. I love these techniques. Labeling, mirroring, paraphrasing, they all work together to create this powerful toolkit for navigating difficult conversations.
Yeah, they do. And as you said, the key is to use them ethically and with genuine empathy for the other person.
Absolutely. It's not about manipulation. It's about building trust and understanding, creating an environment where both parties feel respected and valued.
Now, are you ready for the next tool in our tactical empathy arsenal?
I'm ready, bring it on.
This one's a game changer, and it might surprise you. Asking calibrated questions.
Calibrated questions. Okay, what makes them different from just regular questions?
Okay, so it's about being strategic and deliberate with your questions,
Okay.
using them to elicit specific information and guide the conversation in a desired direction.
Okay.
They're not just random inquiries. They're carefully crafted tools for uncovering hidden motivations and shaping the other person's thinking.
So what kind of calibrated questions should we be asking in a negotiation?
So Voss recommends using certain types of questions that are particularly effective.
Mm-hmm.
The first type is the open-ended question, which we touched on before.
Okay.
These are questions that can't be answered with a simple yes or no.
Right, like instead of asking a buyer, do you like this house? You might ask, what are your initial impressions of this house?
Exactly. That open-ended question invites them to share their thoughts, their feelings, their observations, giving you a much richer understanding of their perspective.
So you're opening the door to a deeper conversation,
Right.
encouraging them to go beyond those simple surface level responses.
Now, another type of calibrated question that Voss recommends is the how or what question.
Okay.
And these are incredibly powerful because they encourage the other person to think critically and share their thought process.
Okay, give me an example of a how or what question that would be effective in a negotiation.
So let's say you're working with a seller who's hesitant to lower their asking price.
Okay.
Instead of asking, would you be willing to consider a lower offer,
Hmm.
which puts them on the spot, you could ask, what factors would need to change for you to feel comfortable accepting a lower offer?
I love that because you're not putting them on the defensive.
Right.
You're asking them to actually articulate their reasoning.
Exactly. And once you understand their thought process, you can tailor your approach accordingly,
So smart.
addressing their concerns and finding creative solutions that meet both of your needs.
So what about a calibrated question for a buyer?
Okay, so let's say you're working with a buyer who's fixated on a minor flaw in a house, something that's easily remedied, but it seems to be clouding their judgment.
Right.
So instead of dismissing their concern, you could ask, how would you envision this house meeting your needs once that issue is addressed?
Oh, I see. You're not minimizing their concern,
Right.
but you're prompting them to look beyond the immediate problem
Exactly.
and visualize the bigger picture.
Right. It's about using calibrated questions to shift their perspective, to help them see the possibilities, and ultimately to make a decision that aligns with their best interests.
I'm starting to see how these calibrated questions, labeling, mirroring, paraphrasing,
Yeah.
it all works together to create this powerful synergy.
Yeah, it does.
It's about listening attentively, understanding the other person's perspective, and then using these carefully crafted questions to guide the conversation towards a mutually beneficial outcome.
Precisely. It's about becoming a master communicator,
Yeah,
not just a smooth talker. And the best part is these skills are transferable to any area of life,
absolutely.
from negotiating a raise at work to resolving a conflict with a loved one.
This has been an incredible deep dive into tactical empathy.
Yeah,
I feel like I've learned so much.
good.
I feel equipped now to navigate difficult conversations and build stronger relationships.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
I know, I know.
In the final part of our deep dive, we're going to explore even more advanced techniques from Never Split the Difference, techniques that will help you bend reality-shaped perceptions and achieve your negotiation goals with confidence and finesse.
I can't wait. Bring on the Jedi mind tricks. All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We're going to be wrapping up our look at Never Split the Difference today. And I'm really excited about this last part because we're getting into some next level stuff.
Yeah, we saved some of the best stuff for last. Today, we're going beyond individual tactics and looking at the mindset and strategies that can really take your negotiation skills to the next level.
Okay, I'm ready to level up. So what's the first principle we need to master?
It's a concept that Voss calls bending reality. Now, before you start thinking we're talking about some sort of Jedi mind trick, it's not about manipulation. It's about understanding that reality is subjective, especially in negotiation, and you can use psychological principles to influence how others perceive the situation.
Okay, so you're saying we can actually shape the other person's view of the facts, like highlighting certain aspects, downplaying others to create a more favorable outcome.
Exactly. Think of it like a photographer adjusting the lens to capture the perfect shot. You're not changing the subject, but you're choosing how to frame it, what to emphasize, what to leave in the shadows.
Okay, I like that analogy. So give me a concrete example of how we might bend reality in, say, a real estate negotiation.
Let's say you're representing a buyer who's fallen in love with a house, but they're fixated on some small flaw. Maybe the kitchen appliances are outdated. Instead of getting bogged down in this debate about the actual cost of replacing those appliances, you could bend reality by framing it in a different context.
Okay, so how do you do that? Do you just try to downplay the issue and hope they don't notice?
Not exactly. It's about acknowledging the flaw, but then shifting the focus to the home's unique features and benefits that outweigh that imperfection. You might say something like, it's true, the appliances aren't brand new, but imagine how incredible this kitchen will be once you've personalized it with your own style and appliances. This house has such great bones, such potential, it's just waiting for your vision to bring it to life.
Okay, so you're acknowledging their concern, but then you're reframing it as an opportunity, like a chance for them to create their dream kitchen. It's like turning a negative into a positive.
Exactly. You're bending reality by subtly shifting their perception of value. They're no longer hung up on that small flaw. They're envisioning the possibilities, the potential that this house holds.
I'm realizing how much of negotiation is about psychology and persuasion, not just logic and numbers.
Right.
It's about understanding how people think and make decisions, and then using that knowledge to create those win-win outcomes.
Absolutely. Voss emphasizes that emotions play a huge role in decision-making, even in what seem to be very rational situations like buying or selling a house. And that's where all those tactical empathy techniques we talked about, they become so crucial.
Right. So using labeling, mirroring, paraphrasing, calibrated questions, all of that can really build rapport, help us understand the other person's perspective, and ultimately influence their emotions in a way that leads to a more favorable outcome.
Exactly. It's about connecting with them on a deeper level, tapping into their desires and fears, and then shaping their perceptions to align with your goals. Now, another powerful principle we can use to bend reality is loss aversion.
Loss aversion. Okay, that sounds intriguing. Tell me more.
Okay, it's a psychological principle that basically says people are generally more motivated to avoid losses than to achieve gains of equal value. So in other words, the pain of losing, say, $100 is often felt more strongly than the pleasure of gaining $100.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of like how a bad review can stick with you way longer than a good review. So how can we use this principle in a negotiation?
By framing our proposals in terms of potential losses, you can actually create a sense of urgency and motivate the other person to act. So instead of just focusing on the benefits of accepting your offer, you subtly highlight the risks of rejecting it.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So, like, if I'm a real estate agent representing a seller, and instead of just saying, this is a great offer, you should accept it, I might say something like, this is a really strong offer in this market. If you wait for a better one, you risk losing valuable time and potentially missing out on other opportunities that might come along.
Exactly. You're not being like alarmist or manipulative. You're just reminding them of the potential downsides of inaction, which taps into their natural aversion to loss and encourages them to make a decision. This ties back to the certainty effect that we talked about before, right? People are drawn to certainty. They want to avoid potential losses, even if those losses are just perceived losses.
This is amazing. It's like reverse psychology for negotiators.
It is.
Instead of pushing them towards what they might gain, you're gently nudging them away from what they might lose.
Yeah.
So smart. Now, another technique we talked about that can be used to bend reality is anchoring.
Yeah, anchoring. Anchoring is incredibly powerful because it plays on our natural tendency to be influenced by the first piece of information we receive, even if that information is irrelevant or arbitrary.
So, like, if I'm selling a house and I throw out a ridiculously high asking price, even if I know it's totally unrealistic, I'm setting an anchor that's going to make any subsequent offers seem more reasonable in comparison.
Exactly. Even if that initial anchor is totally outrageous, it still has this subconscious influence on the other person's thinking. It kind of sets the stage for the negotiation. It influences their perception of what's possible, what's acceptable.
Okay, it's like setting the bar high so everything else looks lower in comparison. Now, I know we've talked about a lot of really powerful techniques today, and it can be tempting to see them as some kind of magic formula for getting what you want in a negotiation. But I imagine there's some ethical considerations that we need to keep in mind.
Absolutely. These techniques are most effective when they're used ethically and with genuine empathy for the other person. It's not about manipulating or tricking people into making decisions that they're going to regret later.
Right. It's not about winning at all costs. It's about creating those win-win outcomes where both parties feel good about the agreement.
Exactly. It's about using your understanding of human psychology to facilitate a collaborative process, not to exploit or deceive.
Okay, good. That's reassuring to hear. Now, as we wrap up our deep dive into Never Split the Difference, I'm curious about one last concept you mentioned, and that's finding the black swan.
Ah, yes, the black swan. It's one of the most crucial aspects of Voss's approach, and it emphasizes the importance of being adaptable and open to unexpected opportunities throughout the negotiation. So a black swan is this piece of information, often hidden or seemingly insignificant, that can completely change the game.
So it's like that missing puzzle piece that suddenly makes everything click into place. But how do we find these elusive black swans?
It's all about being a keen observer, an active listener, and a relentless question asker. You pay attention to the other person's body language, their tone of voice, the things they emphasize and the things they avoid. Ask calibrated questions that probe beneath the surface, uncovering their true motivations and hidden priorities.
Okay, so it's like being a detective, searching for those clues that can unlock the mystery of the negotiation. And sometimes the most valuable black swan we discover is that maybe this deal isn't right for us, that it's actually better to walk away than to force a compromise that doesn't serve our best interests.
Exactly. Knowing when to walk away is just as important as knowing when to push forward.
Well, this has been an incredible journey into the world of negotiation. I feel like I've gained a whole new set of skills and a much deeper understanding of human psychology.
Yeah, and remember, the key to mastering negotiation is practice, persistence, and this willingness to constantly learn and adapt.
Absolutely. So go out there and start using these techniques in your own life, whether you're negotiating a salary, buying a car, or just trying to decide what to have for dinner. You might be surprised at the results.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, happy negotiating.
See you next time.